Welcome to Conquering by Determination, Inside Talks with Heather Fraley. This episode is brought to you by Our Natural Shop, your one-stop shop for quality CBD patches, cream, and oil.
Welcome back, everyone. We are super excited about this episode today with Ken Shamrock, also known as the world's most dangerous man. MMA fighter, UFC champion, UFC Hall of Famer, and the first foreign champion in the pancrase fighting, and founders of the Lion's Den. Welcome, Ken. It is so great to have you today, and I appreciate you coming on. So we had some technical difficulties the first part of our show, and I apologize. So I'm going to try to sum it up really quick and then let Ken take over when the episode picked back up again. So Ken took us back to when he was growing up in Georgia in the 1960s to the age of 5, where his mom wasn't around very much and he never really knew his dad, his biological father. He never met him before. So he was basically out fending for himself and defending himself as well. And he shared with us how he got in his first fight at the age of 5. And that kind of took me back a bit because I have a son who is 5 and I could not imagine him getting in a real street fight. And it really, it really hit home, I guess, the life that he really lived. And he took us back to where he had to defend himself every time he would go out on the street to walk, or he said he would go to the dumpster to find something to eat or toys to play with. And I asked, was this like a bad neighborhood? Why were you getting in fights? Were you angry all the time and kind of taking that out on people? And he said, no, actually, it was kind of the time of growing up that I was in the 1960s when there was a lot of fights and chaos that the police officers back then would start with African American individuals that were doing no wrong. They were just walking down the street, and it became a really big movement. And seeing that on the television, the African American children would be at home and their families would be kind of talking about that and going over it and upset and hurt. And Ken said, rightfully so. They had every right to feel that way. And those young children would then see Ken, that he was a different color than they were, and they would take that out on him. And he said he had to just defend himself, and over had said, rightfully so. He was not upset at that. He totally could see their point of view and understand where that hurt and frustration and that anger came from, because it was not right at all. So that's kind of where we had the technical difficulties, and I apologize again. And now I'm going to let Ken take it over from here.
We didn't have mirrors in our house. We all slept in one bed. There was no mirrors in our house. It wasn't like we could just constantly keep looking at ourselves. So basically, here I was in this environment, then moving to Napa, California, and now we had our own bedrooms and we had mirrors. And so here I was going to this school. It was a kindergarten. I think I was 10 at the time when we finally moved down to Napa, between 9 and 10 years old. And I remember I went to my class, and I remember looking around, was like, I didn't belong. Like, they looked differently, I talked differently, and I was different. And I didn't fit in here. I just didn't feel comfortable. And
you felt comfortable in the old place where you were.
I grew up there. That was my environment. I knew what to expect. So my first day of school, some kids started walking up towards me, making fun of the way I dressed, the way I talked, because I had a southern drawl, and the way I acted. And where I came from, there wasn't a whole lot of talking. You got jumped or beat up. It happened. There wasn't some guy standing there going, okay, at 3 o'clock, meet behind the gym at 3 o'clock. You're like, what? What is that? Like, what are you saying? Like, nobody in their right mind, at least where I came from, would plan a fight. Like, that was odd to me. So I looked at him as soon as he said fight, I hit him. And he had 3 of his buddies standing around me. I started beating on him. And I was 10 years old, right? And I started beating on him, put the boots to him, and these guys took off running. And I couldn't figure out what was happening in this place, because the world I came from, I understood it. This world was so fake and plastic. When I moved there, it was like, I was like, man, I'm king of the jungle here. Like, especially in my group that I was in, because there was no intimidation or anything like that was going on, because usually in these middle class, upper class, there's a lot of talking, a lot of staring, a lot of trying to intimidate somebody. It didn't happen where I came from. You either did or you didn't.
Wow. So it was more like it was culture shock. I mean, you were used to having to defend yourself, stand your ground, essentially, beat the other person up to be able to survive. And you go to the new location, and it's like, wow, these kids aren't trying to beat me up.
No, it was more like they were talking to me, and I couldn't understand, are we going to fight or aren't we? It's like I couldn't figure out if I was being threatened or not, but I knew I was, but there was a whole lot of dialogue going on. I was like, I just wasn't used to that, right? I was like, they came, so a lot of times you didn't even see them. You mean you were getting beat up before you even saw it. So to have that come at me like that was really a shock to me, because I was like, as soon as you said the word fight, I understood that. Like I knew that's what it was. Okay, we're fighting. And so I started fighting. But just the whole other stuff that came with that was, it was a shock to me, because you didn't make dinner plans to go fight somebody.
Right. Do you feel like this is kind of where it stemmed from on your career, of how you kind of went into that?
I think it had a lot to do with after I got stabbed at 10 behind 7-Eleven. I was in a kind of a gang fight, and I got stabbed and ended up in juvenile hall. I'd already robbed a bunch of stores. I already had a car theft and burglary, and so they were looking for me, and they got me when I was 10, and I went into placement after that, which means the court became my parents. They took me out of my home. They put me in different placements to try to rehabilitate me. And I think that's where I started to get that toughness, because here I was pulled out of a home, which wasn't much of a home anyways. And my brothers were all pulled away from me, and they all went separate places. And so here I was in these different homes, and every home you went to, you were always having to make a name for yourself quickly, so that people they knew who you were. They weren't going to punk you. They weren't going to push you around. And so every place I went to, and I think I went to 6 different homes in 3 years. So there was a lot of new places I had gone that I had to prove myself again and again, over and over again. And so I think that's where I literally got that toughness to want to be a fighter, was because I had been doing it since I was 5 years old. And then, as I started being put into placement in juvenile halls, there was always somebody wanting to challenge you. And pretty soon, it wasn't about survival. It was just about, being the man. It was about being the guy. Like, I'm the guy, and I'm going to show you, and you're gonna be doing what I want you to do. So that's where I think I got that toughness from. When I got into the group home, the Shamrock Boys Home at 13 years old, and that's when I really started realizing changes and being able to find that spiritual side to what God wanted me to do, and to help guide me understanding what it meant to be a Christian, because everything I knew about Christianity was they were weak, or at least it looked like they were weak.
It seemed like that, yeah.
Yeah, from outside looking in, you just think they're weak, and until you really get to understand the Bible and know the Bible, which is full of violence and full of corruption, but the strength behind all of that, when you look at the Bible and read the Bible and understand the strength behind all those things that go on in there, you understand that there is no way that you can't be more than the strongest person in the world when you have that kind of faith and that kind of belief, and know that there's nothing anybody can do to you.
It's so true. I heard you say before in one of your interviews, it's just who I am, it's God-given. And have you ever thought back that maybe this was kind of God's plan to begin with? You can't say God's plan to make a child go through what he went through at such a young age, but kind of built that mentality for you and took you on this path to where you would have the platform that you have now, and you would be able to help others and walk through all this and know it, from A to Z, the worst case scenario.
I do. I think that we all understand that God has a path and a choice for all of us, and it's whether or not we decide to pick it up and run with it and be able to be guided by him. Well, obviously, none of us are perfect. We all fall off. We all do things that, we shouldn't be doing, but that's not the point. The point is the journey, and constantly knowing that he is your Savior and that you believe in him without a shadow of a doubt. And no matter what happens after that, even though you may fall down here or there, just every single time you get up, you go back to where you need to be. So for me, it's the journey, and it's the actual living that journey every single day. But I think that there was a chance for me to help people understand Because there's so many people out there, even in the Christian world, when I first got saved, and people saw what I did as a fighter, and they looked at it and they said, how can you, profess to be a Christian when you're out there beating people up? And I couldn't answer it. I was like frustrated. And, I remember I sought a few people out and they would say, kept telling me, yeah, that's something you need to probably start thinking about. Try to figure it out because what you're doing is a sin. And I remember I went to this one pastor and he looked at me and he goes, let me ask you a question. He goes, when you walk into that ring and you prepare to fight, what's your thoughts? I said, well, to tell you the truth, Pastor, I said, everything that I am is through sports. And that everything that I'm going to be and the success I'm going to have, being able to put a roof over my kid's head, being able to take care of my wife and my family and put food on the table and become something that I wouldn't be able to do without this opportunity. I said, that guy's standing across from me and that he's standing in my way of being successful and I'm going to hurt him. I'm going to destroy him. I'm going to put him straight. And he looked at me and he said, that's sin. And I looked at him. I said, well, how else am I supposed to do this? And he looked at me and he said, the biggest thing in the Bible and that people make mistake on is our thoughts. He said, you could do the exact same thing and your thoughts be different. It's not a sin. And he said, for example, if there was a pretty girl walking down the street, some guy turned and looked and said, man, I want to nail that girl. Is that a sin? Absolutely. Because his thought process is a sin. But if the other guy stand next to him and go, man, that woman is definitely a beautiful lady. Is that a sin? It is not.
No.
You're not thinking a sexual thought. You're thinking that woman has put herself together nicely and I respect her.
Right.
Here's the other thought. When you walk into the ring and you look across the ring and your thought process is to hurt that man, that's a sin. But you could go out there and do the exact same thing if your thought process was going out there and figuring out what that man's strengths are. Does he do good kicks? Does he high kick, low kick? Is he good at submissions? Is his conditioning, is it weak or strong? And you go in there and you attack him at those things and go out and do the same exact thing. It's not a sin. It's your thought going into that fight, whether or not you're trying to hurt him on purpose or whether you're trying to go out there and defeat him in a combat situation.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. Those are wise words. Can you kind of express, I kind of took us off track when I mentioned all that about the boys' home, how that experience was going into that from the different homes that you had been into and just kind of like the shock, but yet the warmth that was there?
Yeah, I remember when we first pulled up to the house, I said, I've been to several placements and failed all of them. Just ran away because it just didn't feel right. And I remember going to Shamrock Boys Home, and it was different because I remember Bob Shamrock, when he came in, he actually introduced himself to us, which that never happened. And then he would send the probation officer, a parole officer, in with the cook. And the cook would basically make him coffee and have some cookies or whatever he wanted. And he sat down and he talked with us, not the probation officer. All the other homes that we went to, they would send us off with some peer person that had been there a while. He'd show us around where to put our stuff. And then the group home owner and the probation officer would talk. Well, he did the complete opposite. He was talking to us. And the other thing is that he owned this home. Bob Shamrock owned the home. It wasn't like brought house parents in to take shifts, 8-hour shifts, and then went home. He owned it. He lived there. This was his house. And it was a $1 million home. It was beautiful. When we first pulled up, I thought we came to the wrong place. There's no way we're going to be living in a house like this. And the next thing I think is that, and especially in those times, was they didn't allow you to teach religion, whether it was Buddhism or whether it was Protestant, Catholic, Christian, whatever. They didn't allow that stuff. Every Sunday he would teach church. And the reason why they allowed this look the other way when he did this was because it's his success rate, that the amount of kids that would go doing well coming out of that home. And so whenever you ask somebody, and people have done that, when they ask, why is this home so much more successful? And they said, well, because, Bob Shamrock is just, he's good at what he does and this and that. And someone would say, well, what about they teach church then and that God lives in that house? There's no way that they would be convinced that that's what it is because they were non-believers. But if you look at all these other homes, there were people there that were good. There were people that cared, that wanted to help kids. but God didn't live in that house.
Mm-hmm.
So it didn't have the same atmosphere as the other homes did because he taught church there every Sunday. So there was this presence in there. And every kid that went there, you know, the success rate was 99%. Very rarely did we ever see anybody fail.
Wow. That's a high percent.
Very high, because most of the kids that end up leaving were kids that already had made their time 6 months or 9 months. The only one that I ever saw, there was a couple different ones that had gone there, was that they made a decision they didn't want to stay, so they left. They ended up getting themselves in trouble and pulled out. But as far as people wanting to make it there, the kids that went there, it was very, very high. And that's why he was able to teach church, because nobody else was able to do that. But he did it anyways, and they didn't say anything. Wow.
Well, that's neat. That is really, well, just like you hear the saying, they take the Bible out of school, but yet if you had the Bible in school, they allow it in prison.
Right. There's a journey that you travel without having the understanding of that goodness and that forgiveness and that love, understanding what that is. Then how is it that you expect people to be able to live a better life if you're not willing to let them have that opportunity to get it?
Right, exactly. That's a good point. Okay, so you were adopted at 14?
I was adopted when I was 18.
Okay.
I lived there at 13. I got there when I was 13. And at 13 years old, I had done my time. A year came up. They were going to send me back home. They sent me back home. I didn't want to go. And I remember it wasn't my dad at the time, but ended up adopting me, Bob Shamrock. He told me that if I wanted to come back, I was welcome. He'd take me back in. And I remember 2 weeks at home, I called him and told him I can't make it because I got sent back. And this is the problem with the system, is that these kids do well when they're in placement because of their structure. And that once they do good for a year, they take them out and say, hey, pat them on the back, shake their hand, great job. And they send them back into the same environment in which they got in trouble, which was the same home, the same friends, the whole same environment. So how do they expect to stay out of trouble when they're around the old friends and everything? So I chose to go back, and I did. And once I chose to go back, I never looked back. I was there till the home. We ended up selling the home when I was 27.
Wow, that's awesome. So did you play football in college?
I played in college. I played in high school, college. I broke my neck when I was a senior in high school.
That's what I wanted. Yes, that's what I wanted to get to.
I was told I'd never play contact sports again, which was, if you remember my story, that's just who I was. It's like that's how I became relevant and important. I felt like I was somebody again because the teachers wanted to help me get good grades because they needed me to play in the game, and people wanted to be my friend because I was a good athlete, and I just became not just this thug kid that was going to die someday. But now I became part of the group in school. Like, everybody liked me. And I felt like, wow, man, this is a different thing for me. And I remember as life goes, these are the different things that happen in the world. We think everything's going great. And then when something happens, what do? Do you just fall down and die, or just you stay there, you get up and just keep going? And I remember I broke my neck. I was wrestling in high school. I was undefeated. And I remember I would take a guy down. I slipped. He fell on me, broke my neck. I went to the hospital. Doc comes in, shows the x-rays, the neck broke, and so they're going to have to do surgery and take a bone chip out of my hip, fuse at my neck. I wouldn't be able to play sports again. And I remember thinking to myself, that can't happen. I mean, like, I don't know anything else. And I remember I was depressed, and I remember Bob Shamrock was at the hospital with me, and he looked at me and he goes, do you think that God would bring you this far just to turn around and walk away from you now? And I kind of looked at it. It didn't mean anything to me because here I am with a broken neck. And I'm like, what does that mean?
You're not laying in this bed, are you?
Yeah. And so my dad looks at me, he goes, you are the only one that can make a difference here. You're the only one that can change the outcome of this. Nobody else can do this for you. Only you can. He says, you can either lay here and pout, or you can get up and do something about it. And I literally, I was like, that's right. This doctor's saying I can't. That doctor has no idea what I'm willing to do to get to where it is I want to go. He has no idea my determination or what I'm willing to do to get there. Like, I will do everything. I will go twice as much as anybody else to achieve what I want. And I remember thinking to myself, how's this guy going to say that to me? He doesn't know me. And I remember after I got out of the hospital, I started lifting, I started training. Now, my father didn't mean it like that. He meant like, well, you go play baseball, or, you know, you could be a counselor and help other people through situations. But I took it a different way. And that's when God speaks to everybody differently, right? He may say something, and it can mean something different to everyone. But to me, it meant get up and get going, because this isn't the end. And so I did. I went through it. I started training. I started lifting. I ended up playing college ball, All-American. A year and a half later, I'm standing on a football field playing linebacker after breaking my neck. You know, and then a few years later, I'm standing in the ring, a world champion. The determination, and from that thing that my father had told me at that time, I took it as like, you're right. How is anybody able to tell me what I'm capable of doing? Only God is the one that can tell you and help you achieve what it is you want to do. And if he tells you that, or if he puts obstacles in front of you, then you understand that there's a different direction you need to go. But all he did was put obstacles in front of me that kept me going in the same direction to achieve the goals I wanted to achieve.
That is awesome. Sounds like Bob, your dad, I don't want to say like he was the one who helped mold that determination, because you already had that determination and perseverance, but he had that positive influence of just that reinforcement and that belief in you and that voice that you needed to hear from an adult. Like someone believed in you.
Right. There's a support that I think sometimes, especially as a parent or even as a role model, is that it's not necessarily how much you say or trying to guide somebody in a certain direction. To me, it's more about supporting the decisions and the direction in which a person is going. It's just being there, just listening and giving them advice of whether or not it's something they want to take or not take, but not trying to detour or try to mold them into something that you want them to be, but just support them in what they're doing and let them mold themselves.
Yes. I often use the silent and listen. It's the exact same letters, but it means so much if you take that and we can just listen to that advice. Yes, and the things that you say to people, a lot of times people try to speak too soon because they think they know it or they care and they want to try to help them. But you're doing more damage than good when you try to jump up and try to help somebody before you know all the information, before you know what is exactly going on and what they want to achieve. Because it can influence their mind.
Yes.
Yeah. What was that support system that, compared to as a child, kind of, and then as an adult? Because as a child, it doesn't sound like you really had that support system. Like you had to build that wall up, that toughness just to survive. You know,
when you talk to kids, and they're especially kids that come from that background where they grew up in the street and as juvenile and in trouble, when they tell you that they don't trust people, they don't trust the law, they have a legitimate beef. Not all law is bad. Not everyone is bad. But a lot of these kids, because of where they come from and because of the way they talk and the way they act, most people don't give them the time of day to listen to them or even care for them. So they push them off on somebody else, or they tell them something just to appease them. They lie to them. They put them places and say, just do this and do that and you'll get this. But there's no intentions of them getting what they're supposed to get. So it's really, the system is in this time, because there's so much going on and because there's so many kids out there that people are not taking the time because they don't have it, for one. And two, they're just trying to appease them for a moment so they can go on and deal with the next situation. And to me, that's a problem, because all you're doing is building up the negativity towards these kids growing up and then the distrust they have in the system.
That's true. I think it was your pancreas fight that you did when you heard them chanting your name. Was that kind of like that moment when you were like, okay, we're moving to that next level now? Like you just felt it?
It was my first fight, and I remembered I'd never been in front of a big crowd or anything, other than small time stuff, football, college, 1,200 here and there, right? But here I was in front of 17,000 people, my first fight, and I was fourth on the card. I remember going in there and I had this fight, and I won my first one, and I remember they chanting my name. It took me a while to understand it, but Sammy, who was the referee and was the guy that helped promote me and get me into this Japanese organization, he was from Florida. And I remember he always said, "Hey, they're chanting your name." And I said, "Huh?" And I went over in Japan, which I didn't know. I went as Wayne Shamrock, which was my middle name, Wayne. And they were saying, Shamrock. And it didn't sound like my name. When he said it to me, I kind of started listening. I was like, yeah. And I remember as I heard that, I was like, that is a drug. I mean, it's like,
wow.
I felt like this is the bomb. There's nothing better than this. This feeling I got right now of being there, being able to have these people like what I do in the ring, and they're chanting my name. Man, I tell you, that was one of the most unbelievable experiences. And I chased it my whole career after that. I mean, literally fed off of that my whole career. Even today, I feed off of that, man.
You can hear it in your voice just when you were describing that. You could hear it.
Yeah, I get such a rush on that, man. I think that's probably why I connect with the fans so well, is because to me, that means a lot to me, is for the fans to appreciate me.
When I heard you say that, I was like, that is so cool. Like, that had to have been like that moment where you got chills and like, I don't want this moment to end.
That was it. You're like, this one is it. But I also understood how I could get it. Like, I knew how I could get this again. I knew how I could stay in that moment, and that was getting better and being the best. I knew this wasn't it. I knew there was more, because it was my first fight, and I knew that this was nothing compared to what I could be.
And you've had some major injuries, over the several years. How did that affect you mentally when you were preparing, and when you were with some of these organizations preparing for these fights? How did you get your mind, there?
It didn't, you see, because that's the kind of mindset that I have, is that when I step into the ring, nothing matters. It's just, this moment is everything. Me and the other guy, and it's about going in there and competing and beating him. And nothing else matters. Everything around me is just, it doesn't exist. And so for me, being in that spot, being able to have that opportunity to stand up there and fight, put everything aside and focus on what my job is, there's nothing better than that. So that to me was an adrenaline rush, man, to be able to do that. And I wouldn't allow anything, nothing, to get in the way of those moments of me in the ring preparing to fight. And I was fortunate to be like that. Like, I was so focused on my job, doing my job, that nothing would distract me from winning.
Share with them what all you have in your body, the things in you, even when you were fighting.
Yeah, I broke my neck when I was 17. We talked about that in high school. They fused my neck, which was, they took a bone chip out of my hip, and they fused it between 6 and 7 in my neck where the cartilage was, because it broke the cartilage and fractured the bone. So they fused it, so I had limitation movement in my neck. And then my shoulder, my right shoulder, has a titanium ball put in it, because that one there I tore all the ligaments and broke my shoulder, so they had to completely replace it. And then my left knee, I've got titanium screws, knee replacement in my left knee. And then I broke my neck again in 2011. So then they had to go in and put plates in. And now I've got 1 through 7 in my neck. I've got metal plates that clamp together on my neck. And then my lower back, I fractured that in 2012. And then they had to put plates 1 through 4 in my lower back.
It's not like you don't use any of those parts when you're in the ring.
Yeah. Well, again, like I said, I'm very fortunate that I have this mentality that I don't think about anything else. I just think about what I'm there for.
Do it.
I focus so much on that I literally, when I went in to go into fight, people said, "You got to stare." That just nobody had anything like to stare. Well, my object when I was in there, I was staring the whole thing. Like, I literally was focusing on destroying that individual. Not, I changed later on to be able to focus on and look right through them, to be able to see weaknesses and be able to attack those weaknesses. And I would stare at them. chest and let them know I was coming.
Wow. Before we sign off, do you have any pieces of advice that you'd want to share with any aspiring athlete today that might be stuck in their head or feeling like they've hit that brick wall?
Well, I know this. I know a lot of times when the athletes get started down this path of playing these kind of rough sports like boxing or MMA, there's this question about whether or not they're Christians. And I want to tell you, if anybody comes to you and tells you that you can't be a Christian and still compete like that, they don't know the Bible. Your thought process is everything. If you're going in to compete against somebody and attack their weaknesses and compete against them and try to win at any cost, put your training in there, do everything you got to do to win, that's not a sin. Now, if you start thinking about, I'm going to kill them, and you start talking like that, like a lot of people do, they don't mean it, but they're talking like that to get themselves pumped up. Now your mentality's changed a bit. Now that is a sin. So just change the mentality. Focus on beating the guy and attacking his weaknesses. Be strategic, which is what you should do anyways. Be strategic in your victory, and then you're fine.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Do you want to share with your fans where they can find you at and anything that you have going on? I just seen that you have a fight coming up in Georgia.
Yeah, it's Super Bowl weekend. I am having the event down there, the 1st and the 2nd. I'm having my event, which is, I believe it is a Thursday, Friday. And I will be down there in Georgia. The advertisements are everywhere. If you're down there, you want to come check it out. If you want to check out and see where the event is and you want to be able to have a location for the event, go to my website, teamshamrock.com. Look up Bar Brawl, and it will be able to tell you all the information that you need. If you want to connect with me on a personal level, you can also go to my Twitter, @ShamrockKen. That's my Twitter. And you can find out whatever information you want to know about any of the stuff I'm doing down there in Atlanta on the 1st and the 2nd.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and best of luck on this next fight that you're going into. And we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate you. Thank you for everything. And listen, everybody have a blessed year, and God bless. Take care.
Thank you. God bless you.